My sister joined us. She had a brief statement of introduction, but
I'll just be here for a little while.
all right.
She's not as talkative as you, I see.
Oh, I can be, trust me. I'm just in
You,
a different kind of state,
oh,
right?
oh, I see. Yeah,
All right,
understandable,
all right,
understandable.
everyone. So let's talk about this lecture tonight, which is Deadening of the Live Center through Misinterpretation of Reality. Well, there's something inside of us called the live center. The guide says this is a beautiful, vulnerable, soft, expressive part of ourselves that we all were in touch with when we were children. And that part never really goes away, but it gets hardened, it gets toughened up, and we have to protect it. And we basically find ways to protect it that are not healthy, including the other subject of this lecture, which is cruelty. So in the first 2 pages of this lecture, the guide talks about a central pathwork concept, which is that we are reluctant to accept the way things are with us right now. We're reluctant to accept ourselves as we are now. Top of page 2, we don't connect our outer state with our inner state. He says, when you finally connect with the fact that your outer state, no matter how undesirable it may be, is exactly a result of what you are, think, feel, and want, you will immediately understand that your outer situation cannot be any different than it is. When you deeply know that it cannot be any different, then you have totally exploited, assimilated, and comprehended your present now, your total situation. So this central concept is that we completely create our reality the way it is right now. In other words, to put it in another way, whatever we're experiencing in our life is perfectly right, perfectly correct, appropriate, and a result of everything that we think, believe, and feel and do. Now, this concept, of course, one is really tempted to, well, maybe is judge people the wrong concept or you're tempted to say, look, somebody else, let's say somebody's being bombed in Gaza right now, is it right for them? Can you say for them, well, your reality is the exact result of everything that you want, feel, think, and experience, and that in a sense it's perfectly correct for you because this is what you created? But rather than getting to that whole debate, I myself look at my own life and I can apply this to my life. And I say to myself, yes, I can really see how everything in my life is an outpicturing, a realization of everything that I am. So like, again, to recap, like the pitfalls of the prosperity gospel. Well, the rich are happy because they're divinely favored by God, because if they weren't favored, they wouldn't be rich. The guide doesn't say that. And of course, something like that is very nuanced. In other words, just because you have money and you may appear to be prosperous, you may still be miserable, and you may still not really be in accord with your own spiritual nature. So the whole concept of prosperity is obviously something that doesn't really hold its shape. Material goods, material prosperity, as we all know, is a kind of shallow kind of prosperity. So, what is prosperity? Prosperity, I guess, I really think is happiness. And what is happiness? Happiness is the ability to connect with that live center the guide talks about, the ability to get in touch with that beautiful, soft, vulnerable, strong, creative, energetic place that we all knew as children, and we all know partially now, and we all partly experience here and there in flashes. That, I think, is prosperity, and that, I think, is happiness. So And the guy does say in these first 2 pages that basically we have to come to terms with our reality, and we have to accept the fact that we've created this. He says, striving toward a different situation when the present situation is not fully understood must result in failure and frustration. And I think that's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, you can make a caricature about it. Like, let's say that you're striving for something. I mean, let's say that I can't think of a good metaphor right now, which is unlikely. Me, I'm always very good with metaphors. But if you want to create something different and you don't realize, I mean, for example, let's say that if you're not wearing any shoes and it's cold, it's a winter, and you're outside, you're walking outside, what's wrong? You're striving toward, you're trying to get somewhere in the snow and the ice, but you don't realize that you don't have any shoes on. You have to address that fact. Maybe not the best metaphor in the world, but the guide says we have to understand our present situation. And how can the present situation be understood? He says that can only happen by becoming fully aware of what you really miss. You must put into words precisely what you would want to be different in your life. This must be the first awareness. So I think people have some superficial ideas of what they would like in their life, what they would like things to be better. The question is, what do they really miss? And I think this also gets to this concept of the live center, because to hook up with an energy that's vulnerable, creative, and soft, that's the energy that's the wanting comes from that energy, not from the ego. I mean, from my ego, I might say I want achievement, material possessions, success in life in various ways, but am I missing those things? What are the things I'm really missing? The guide says that has to be the first awareness. And then the second awareness, he says, must be the extent to which you suffer from what you miss. So I think here we're talking about coming to terms with how people really feel about what they want in their life, what they need, what they may not be willing to acknowledge that they're missing in their life or that they need in their life. And bottom of page 2, what I'm underline, he underlines again what I'm saying is that when you ignore the oneness between your innermost self, that's the live center, and your outer situation, it is always because you run away from yourself. You do not really and totally want to see yourself as you are, but look at yourself only in a limited way and with reservations. Ask yourself, all of you, do you truly wish to see yourself totally as you are? So that's the big question, right? I mean, obviously the idealized self-image doesn't like the idea of seeing ourselves as we are. The idealized self-image wants to mask, disregard, downplay certain aspects of ourselves that we may not like. But that's something that the guide is suggesting that we do. Do you finally admit that it must be in you because you know enough about the truth of these matters, but let it go at that without the willingness to really look? The simple formula of expressing the deep and full intention and desire to see the full truth about oneself at all times is still not sufficiently used. So look, this is one of those big keys, that at any time one has the ability to say, what is the truth of the situation here? What do I really feel? What's the truth of the situation right now? And, my dad was very big on this. He would always write guidance, and he would ask himself, he'd write, in nomine Dei Jesus Jesu Christe, I'm asking God's name, what is the truth right now? And he would then write whatever, his guidance told him to, the guidance that was coming out. So that's a very important key. I didn't mention in the very beginning that in the second paragraph, there's a couple like mystical sentences that I really like, that things that the guide says. He says, one of the most difficult accomplishments is to fully understand the present situation, how it is a direct creation of the individual, what we've been talking about. Quote, just because this understanding could be immediate and near, it seems distant. Just because the connection is so easily available, it seems that to obtain it would require much effort and struggle. Well, this reminds me a lot of the Tao Te Ching, these kind of deep, paradoxically appearing spiritual sentences, concepts. Just because this understanding could be immediate and near, it seems distant. Just because the connection is so easily available, it seems that to obtain it would require much effort and struggle. So there's a kind of knack of connecting with the higher self, I think, that the guide's talking about. Well, the other thing the lecture is about, besides having the courage to look at ourselves as we really are, is cruelty. Cruelty is a big topic, subject of this lecture. And the guide, in a nutshell, says that cruelty is created when we want to shut off or protect this live center, which is soft and vulnerable and also carries creative energy. When we want to suppress it, when we want to disregard it, one of the ways that we do that is cruelty. He says, in most human beings, in some more and in some less, there exist some elements of cruelty. This cruelty is hard to face, but when you do face it, relief and liberation must follow, because nothing further bars the way to being totally in truth with yourself. As long as the cruelty within yourself is not faced, as long as you run away from it, you cannot be clear and comfortable, unafraid and relaxed about yourself. You cannot be good friends with yourself. And then he says, very interesting subject, a couple sentences which I want to talk about. A reliable gauge to determine whether there is still unrecognized cruelty within is the amount of fear you have left. Consider your fear of other people, generally or specifically, fear of life, fear of death, fear of the unknown. The more you are afraid of ruthlessness and separateness, of rejection and humiliation, of physical and mental cruelty, the more must these same exact aspects slumber within yourself, as yet not fully acknowledged. All right, so who's got a cruel streak? Anyone have a cruel streak? You know, Marion, I know you don't. You don't have a cruel streak. I kind of wanted to just talk about this for a moment. A reliable gauge to determine whether there is still unrecognized cruelty within is the amount of fear you have left. So do you think that if one is able to conquer one's fears, if one has no fear, then one has no cruelty? Putin must be very afraid then, because he's a cruel man, right? Cruelty. Look at what's going on in Ukraine. Look at what's going on in Palestine. These people that are cruel, I suppose they're full of fear. If they didn't have the fear, they wouldn't be cruel. Is that right? Because the fear, I think this encapsulates what the lecture is talking about, misinterpretation of reality. You misinterpret reality. You let your fears rule you, and you're cruel. Because if you correctly interpreted reality, you'd know there was nothing to be afraid of. And you wouldn't have to be cruel. You wouldn't have to fight other people for, an acre of land or a house here or there or a bit of territory, because you know your life wouldn't depend on that if you didn't get that. Do people see that connection?
Are they talking about cruel behavior or cruel thoughts?
I think, well, I guess I would say cruel behavior, because I think that obviously, if you behave cruelly, then you have cruel thoughts, I suppose.
Mm.
And if you have cruel thoughts, then I suppose you would tend to act them out.
Not necessarily.
What do you think?
You know,
Well, I must say that I didn't know that. I wasn't able, honestly, to connect the two before. But when I read this lecture, I know that there's a lot of fear in me, but I don't think I was able to. I was connected to that cruel part of me. I am sure is there, and the guy, I think later on in the lecture he gives several examples of how these the different levels that different individuals are at in when it comes to this cruelty and how it is expressed in one's life. But for me, I wasn't able to connect the two. I know I am fearful. I think fear is big in me because I see that, I am fearful, in facing sometimes many life situations. But I was not really, I never thought of myself as being a cruel person. I mean, I became vegetarian like over 30 years ago because I don't want to kill animals, and but it seems that somewhere, and it is probably hidden there, underneath God knows how many other layers. But if it is the way the guy says it here, that that this is the gouge to know by how much fear you have in you, then I suppose there is a lot of cruelty in me because there's quite a bit of fear, of course, and I think. But as I analyze myself, I see that there are episodes. I think it happens to a lot of us. Whenever we have find ourselves in situation because. There is this cruelty that come up, it's like, if you have a confrontation with some individuals or you have a situation with some other persons are blocking you from getting what you want or from meeting, that goal that you want to achieve. And, you don't feel good thoughts towards that person. There is something in there that you want that person to stop. And sometimes you, reach a point where you want to stop that person yourself, even if it takes killing him or her. You know what I mean? And some people actually openly express it like this. I felt like strangling her or him, or killing him or her. That was it's not that obvious in me. I must admit. But I think somewhere hidden in there, this cruelty must be, because, like I said, there is fear in me, and but maybe I express that cruelty maybe by withdrawing from this individual or from the situation, because I think cruelty is not just expressed openly, as wanting to destroy that other person, but you can also do that subtly, like withdrawing or not talking to that person, pulling away. And I think there are different methods that you can actually express that cruelty, right?
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting point that I want to look at myself and keep observing myself on this, along this line, because I must admit that I was not able to connect the two before. That fear is actually, is a gauge to determine how much cruelty is in me. So I think there's some work for me to do there. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. Now, just to go forward a little bit, why does cruelty exist? I think I already mentioned it because the live center is suppressed, but he says, let us now discuss why cruelty exists. After having acknowledged its existence, what then? Before answering this question, I shall remind you of that innermost center of every human being, which activates all of you with all you need to live productively. This live center furnishes you with energy, life force, wisdom, vision, solutions, love, and harmony. It exists deep within every individual. In a young person, a child, it manifests as a very vulnerable spot. Its very aliveness comes forth from a tender and soft center. Sounds like chocolate. Just a joke. When children are hurt and puzzled, when they misunderstand the events around them, they proceed to toughen this vulnerable spot to defend themselves against its soft openness. By these various defense mechanisms, the live center becomes more and more overlaid, hidden, and covered by tough substances. Without an adult and realistic understanding, that is a mature ego, the child cannot handle this soft, malleable live center in which the most powerful, creative, and intelligent forces are contained. For its own protection, it must separate the live center from its consciousness. However, when the child grows into an adult, when the ego becomes mature, the separation becomes an unfortunate handicap. The individual lives in a crippled way, leaving out the best and most reliable aspect of his or her whole being. Only when she or he proceeds to uncover it again and integrate it with the adult ego does the personality become whole and equipped to handle life. So, a little further down, he reemphasizes the vulnerability is the very material, as it were, with which to govern your life in the most dynamic and fruitful way. For this vulnerable spot is the live center, out of which all energy and wisdom is derived. It is that in you which makes it possible to fully experience and enjoy, to have and give pleasure. The potent energy deriving from the live center can be utilized most constructively and meaningfully in the realization that the live center must become a conscious aspect to be integrated with the ego. If this integration is hindered due to misunderstanding and ignorance, the energy will turn destructive. The result of the inverted power must be chaos, separation, disintegration, confusion, suffering, and an inner vision and numbness that makes life appear difficult, ugly, removed, and senseless. So the point is to integrate the live center with the conscious ego. All right.
That's
Yeah,
right.
Camilla, go ahead.
I just would say that, we all are on various journeys ourselves, and we've done various degrees of work on ourselves. And I think it's important to remember that these words are also directed towards a large swath of the public, if you will, in the sense that not everything applies directly to you, the individual, in exactly the way that the guide is talking to about it. We all are on a different sort of stages of our development, and some of us have done the work or have recognized these things in ourselves maybe a long time ago, and so have worked through some of this stuff. So I think it's important when you look at any teaching that you think, what about this is true about me now? What about this was true maybe about me a long time ago? What have I worked through? What do I still need to work on? Say that.
All right. Any other thoughts?
Well, yes,
Maria?
I filter it that way. What I appreciated about this is I call it the spiral. Sometimes the same things turn up, but it's on a very more expansive state of the spiral, the same subject, because I've worked so much. I've had some past life experiences that have been shown to me, the ones that are necessary to see what I brought into this life and have some knowledge of some past lives. But I've had millions of past lives, so I don't need to see all of them. But the ones I have helped me, and that is, and then whatever my images are and misconceptions at birth came in with that. So for me, in reading this, what was very helpful is that it's what the guide said. What helps us handle our emotions is to be grounded in the conceptual. That's the territory you're in, not intellectual, conceptual. What's the lay of the land I'm in? So the guide lays that out. And it's just as Camilla said, everybody's a different place on that, but we can always go back and look. So what I found is that they use the word cruelty, which I take glee in, because I express my cruelty daily. It's there all the time. I call her Mean Nasty Marion, who is right next to me. She's always with me, but she doesn't run the show. But I listen to her because there'll be some grain of truth in her nastiness and in her cruelty. Just as every lower self quality has a divine aspect, because I am totally divine in my God self, my higher self. So in this life, I was drawn to theater. I didn't become a professional actress, but I've done a lot of amateur theater and all that, and some stand-up things. So I turned things a lot into comedy. And since I've had the experience of oneness with my higher self, I know that, so I do some psychodrama of separating out me, nasty, cruel Marion over here, and me, who's expansive, perfect, God self. And then we have a dialogue. So I hold her hand, and when I'm feeling expansiveness, I'm opening into the void and stepping into something new. I know now not to resist her, because she is going to go, hey, wait, I'm not going there. I'm not going into that void with you. I'm staying right here, and I don't care. It's painful here, but it's familiar, and I ain't going. And you can't make me. So I call her belligerent, nasty Marion. And so what it does, it evokes an empathy in me, not a stern master. It opens, because I'm not giving her the power. So I've opened up an empathy. And therefore I can take her hand and I can say, oh, is there something that we could do together that you would feel that you would like to do? And a small step, just something that you would like, and then I notice she calms down a little bit when I'm more empathic. I can say, oh, I see you're scared of that, and I won't make you come out in the void with me when you don't want to. So we have a dialogue, and then it's not long. So sometimes when I'm walking down the street, it's very short. I stop and put my hand on a tree trunk or something if my mind chatter's going. I have a mantra, a name of God, that keeps me out of a lot of mind chatter. But once in a while, that mind chatter takes over. And that's when I know I need to stop and have the dialogue, because people walking down the street looking at their phone and getting in front of me and not watching where they're going. I love the word idiot. I call them all idiots. And I just love that word because I always report it to God. I always say what I'm doing. And I know I am safe and protected, because after I went through 3 near-death experiences in 7 months from the hit and run accident I was in, it ripped away my defenses. So my higher self, lower self is like this. No mask there anymore. So when I'm encountering something, it's right there, the two of them. And so, but my knowingness of my God self is there. So when I'm separate and I'm more identified with being human, Marion, I can tell, oh, here it is again. Yeah, I love that word, idiot. I love calling all the people on the street and get in front of me idiots. And then it makes me smile, and it kind of floats away because I've reported it in, I've turned it over, I've surrendered. And I know, so then, but with Marion, a little scared Marion, I'll sometimes take her hand, I'll tell her, hey, is there something we can do? And she may come up with something. Well, there's that new coffee shop that opened, and I'd love to have a latte. I'll say, oh, all right, we could take time today to go there and have a latte. I'll hold your hand when we go. I'll make sure that we're all safe. Then when I find out, I get in touch with a real need, because I can get so busy with my life, I forget to go have a latte. Where does the real need come from? Me, nasty Marion, when she is held with empathy. So I'll end with that, because it's a process, and I'll end with that. And so it's like back and forth, but I'm grateful in this life. I had a lot of psychodrama, and that was one of my talents I came with. So I use it. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I think belligerent Marion is fearful and cruel. Is that right? Among other things.
And there's some wisdom there, and wisdom.
And wise. Well, that's the higher self, the observer, has the wisdom.
Yes. And once the observer is activated, the transformation automatically begins. That's the guide taught us. It automatically begins once the observer is activated. Don't have to do a lot of work. Trust the intuition, trust the guidance. Yeah.
Tracy, I feel like I wish I could see you, but and Joel. What's up?
I'm right here. I'm right here.
Paradigm.
And I found what Camilla said to be very enlightening, because like Juan, I don't think I'm cruel, but what she said is, we can't just look at this moment in time. We need to, because we've all been on the pathwork for for many years. So, some of you, most of your life, but even the short-term people amongst us, like Juan and me, we're talking about a decade. So it's not, it's not a week or a month or even a year, and that who we are now, after all of the work that we put in, is not the same person that we were when we started on this path. So because I was really struggling with this. I was like, I'm not cruel, and if I am, it's so hidden from me that I don't even have an inkling of it. Even when I meditate on it, but I probably was it before, and so I thought that statement by Camilla was quite enlightening.
I think that the cruelty manifests itself. I mean, I don't want to tell tales out of school, but Alan, you can be pretty mean, and you've said pretty mean things to me and my sister sometimes, and you don't really even like to acknowledge it. And
We'll talk about this later.
oh, see, there you go. Got to be perfect, right, Alan? So you can be mean, and you're like, oh, it's a joke, but there's some cruelty in that, and I think that I have similar things to Marion, where I'm very judgmental, and I think that comes. I for a long time I really wasn't, and then I sort of gave into it, and there's a part of me that's just like, yeah, like certain people are idiots, and this is whatever, just kind of being contemptuous of stuff, and that's a kind of a version of cruelty. Maybe not so much that you're actually expressing it, but you feel it, and it's like, I'm better than you, and I know better, and and you're doing this wrong, and I mean, maybe they are doing it wrong, but but I think that keeps us separate from our fellow human beings, and especially in this time when things are so divisive and people are so divided, I find that when I let go of that judgment and I just am open to whoever the person is, really remarkable connections can happen, even the ones that you don't expect or even think are even possible. So there's something about recognizing, oh, this is that judgmental part of me. That's the voice that says, you're an idiot, I'm smarter, I'm better than you, because I believe this and you believe that, or whatever it is. Instead of saying, who is this human being that I'm encountering? What can I learn from them, and what can they learn from me? So there needs to be, yeah, some kind of opening up. The other thing I wanted to say had to do more with the creativity stuff that you were talking about.
No, I can only see half of your face.
That you were talking about earlier, the creativity stuff, because I feel like that's my biggest struggle, is that I feel like there's a part of me that seems so close, that is to say my creative self, but it seems, because it seems so easy, such an easy thing. Oh, I should do this, I should paint, I should draw, I should be making music, I should be writing. Because it seems so easy and obvious, it actually seems even harder to actually do. And I don't understand fully in myself what it is that is stopping me from that creativity. Why am I not doing it? What is the force against that? That is, I think there is some fear of pleasure, some fear of success, some fear of joy, some fear of accomplishment, but I'm not sure that's all it is. So maybe there is something in this lecture that talks about that a little bit. I don't know.
And I just want to jump on the bandwagon. Thank you so much, Camilla, for sharing, because you've said some things very powerfully, and I want to just kind of reflect it back to you. Powerful questions bring powerful answers. So there's that. Stay with the questions. They are powerful. And it will emerge. Stay with the questions, because figuring it out doesn't work anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone else have thoughts, or shall I continue with a little more of the lecture? Bottom of page 4. He says there's a 3-step process to try to access the inner wisdom in the live center. Says, What you must learn how to do now is, number one, observe the existence of the live center. Two, observe the mechanics by which you discourage its manifestations and toughen the vulnerable spot. Three, deliberately stop the mechanics of disengagement and follow the live center's unfoldment. So Camilla, what are the ways in which the mechanics by which you disengage its manifestations? Do you relate to that? Just thinking.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you mean when I want to be creative and then I'm not? Is that what you mean?
Right. In other words, you can perceive the live center inside you, right? You can perceive
Yes.
it.
Yes.
It exists.
Very
So
much.
is there ways in which you toughen the vulnerability and you disengage the live center?
It's called watching stupid TV.
Bingo.
It works. It shuts everything down. You're not creative. You're not really engaged. You're watching somebody else's creation. You don't have to think for yourself. It's a kind of a way of shutting everything down. And then, it's also that whole thing the guide always talks about, the creative emptiness. Like that's sort of terrifying, to me, or maybe to a lot of us. It's like, oh my God, if I have this creative emptiness, oh no, what's going to happen? It's just this hole. It's this vortex I'm just going to fall into. What but when I read about creative people, a lot of what they need to do is be in the quiet and be in nature, get rid of the noise so that the creativity can come out. And that's part of, I mean, if every day I could just spend an hour just being open to the creative forces and just do that, I think things would really move forward for me. But I'm kind of terrified of it.
I just want to throw this in. This is where sometimes what's called bookending. You know what bookending is? You have a friend and you both give yourself a half hour to do something creative and you call yourself before and after, but no discussion because it needs that kind of boundary, that what you're approaching. It's like the death of the ego. And when you approach that, you need more and more and more support. So sometimes bookending, which is a very prominent way of doing something with a friend, I'll bookend with you. So call each other up. We both have a half hour to be creative, and 1, 2, 3, hang up and go. And whatever emerges, that's it. So it's that kind of tenuousness where you are on that cliff of opening to something that is so wanting to emerge that it's scaring human Camilla. Yeah.
Yes.
That's a great idea.
Do other people feel that way? Fear of creativity or fear of like opening up to that creative emptiness?
I look back at myself and I really appreciated what you said, Camila, about looking at ourselves today versus 5, 10, 20 years ago. And I think about when I reflect back how much of that hardness in me has melted and I'm not even aware that it has melted away. And I know I still have a lot more to go. And to Juan's point, at work, I remember I never thought my behaviors were cruel. I always thought people were non-compliant and I had to drag them through compliance to get them from point A to point B. And that's really an act of cruelty. And I think, my fear was rather complex, which caused that behavior. So I really thank everyone for this lecture, Alan. It really is taking me through some things.
Yeah. Like rethinking what you were doing then and what the part of it that was untransformed. Because of course, some of it may have been just a good impulse or a reason, a way of you're in at work, you need to get stuff done, but maybe there's also a part of it that really was untransformed.
So this is like a meditative discussion we're having. The guide says on top of page 5, through appropriate meditations, integration between the live center and the ego will take place, so that its substance will become strong and resilient without losing its soft aliveness. So that's something to meditate on. Yeah. The vulnerable live center is separated from your wakeful consciousness. That is your problem. You find yourself in the predicament of possessing an adult ego with all its faculties intact, yet separated from that vulnerable live center. Yeah, so I think we all understand this concept about identifying with the live center and letting the ego, what would you say, surrender to it, or let the ego accept it as a part of the personality that needs to be enabled and celebrated. Then he talks about cruelty some more on page 5.
I'm gonna have to get off. I'm so sorry, you guys. This was lovely. I'll come back to the next one. It's so good to see you all, and this is lovely.
Wonderful.
Now I know it's here. I can do it again. And Marion, we'll talk.
We'll
Okay.
talk. Yeah,
This is a
thank
very
you
good
for
idea.
thank you for gracing us. That word grace. Yes, it's there. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilla.
Yeah,
Bye
thank you,
now.
Camilla, for coming.
Thank you.
All right, that's my sister. 3 years younger. Yeah. Yeah. Raised in the Pathwork. Well, where was I? That was nice. Nice to have her visit. So here on page 5, I think he just recaps when the live center is denied the cruelty. The more the live center is unrealistically and inadequately defended and blocked, denied and covered up, the more do some aspects of the self come into being, of which one will feel ashamed and guilty. One of the severest forms is that of cruel impulses. Then at the middle of the page, cruelty can exist only as a result of a separation between the live center and the ego. To put it in more practical terms, cruelty exists because reality is misinterpreted, which causes the individual to further inactivate the live center. Yeah, I guess I'm really looking at this in the context of like the Ukraine or Palestine. When you don't understand reality properly, cruelty exists because reality is misinterpreted. Very interesting. In other words, the values, the things that you think you need to survive, that's a misinterpretation of reality. If you think that cruelty helps your survival, you're misinterpreting reality. That's what the guide encouraged us to know.
It's kind of like what Marion was saying before. If you don't know the truth of who you are, then you fall into negative thoughts or cruel impulses because of the fear of realizing either the truth of who you are or realizing the negativity that lives inside of you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And the first step is not to resist the resistance, but know as a human being, every expansive movement we have will have resistance. And if that's accepted as a normal, being a human here on earth, taking on this human form, this ego form, then that's where empathy comes in. Not sympathy, not feeling sorry for anybody, but empathy for that self that resists. It's natural for the human to do that.
Right. And what you said, Beverly, is exactly what he says here in this 5th paragraph. Only by first acknowledging to yourself what it is that you actually believe. How can you discover such misunderstanding? Only by first acknowledging to yourself what it is that you actually believe, then interpreting what that means. This applies to anything that makes you feel disharmonious. Yeah, so it's the awareness of the negativity that liberates you, in the same way that the connection with this live center liberates you. And for you to understand the negativity means you have to acknowledge it. And then you have to, in other words, have the courage to admit what you actually believe. And if you believe that, we live in a harsh and cruel world, to some degree, that's a negative perception. You have to acknowledge that you believe that. And then he says, go to the next step. He says, you may feel slighted, discriminated against, rejected. You may say the words, but you do not fully acknowledge to what extent you feel this, nor why you feel it, or what makes you believe that your feelings are justified and appropriate. You can then go to the next step and ask yourself, is this real, or do I just believe it? Could it be otherwise?
Mhm.
Yeah, so speaking to all the non-cruel people, cruelty is the greatest stumbling block to self-facing, to living in the dynamic, adventurous beauty of each now. It is also the greatest factor in running away from yourself and is ultimately a result of misinterpreting reality. Yeah. So, like you, Juan, I'm still trying to come to terms with my cruelty. In other words, obviously, I have some blocks to self-facing and living in the dynamic, adventurous beauty of each now. Obviously, I don't fully live in that reality. Aren't the words great? Dynamic, adventurous beauty of each now. I have some resistance to that. And I guess I
Yeah.
have to connect or understand what the guy, when he says cruelty is the greatest stumbling block. Is it cruelty to myself, to those around me?
Well, yeah. What applies to you applies to others.
So anyway, then at page 6, he's a 4-step process here in which he kind of recaps the meditative approach to getting through this problem. Number one, look at, and specifically when you're dealing with an issue in your own life, when we're dealing with something, an undesirable situation, a lack of fulfillment and emptiness cannot be eliminated and changed into a more desirable condition unless you understand that the present situation cannot be different. You fully recognize that the cause is in yourself. So here we are, back to what he said in the very beginning of the lecture, which is the present situation cannot be different unless you recognize how you caused it. Right? Yeah. QED. And then part 2, let us separate the admission of the lack, which is the first point, from the second point, the recognition of what in you caused the lack, so that you deeply experience the oneness between yourself and your life situation. So in other words, if something is shitty in your life, if something is screwed up, like, your plumbing doesn't work, or, you lost your job, or like the guide is actually saying, don't you think, Kevin? He's saying that somehow we are called upon to embrace the discomfort or the difficulty and create and embrace the fact that we caused it, that we had a part in it. And then we can experience the oneness between yourself and your life situation.
Yeah, it's oneness that it goes back to, because, well, you can only really hold cruelty inside of yourself when you wish to inflict pain.
Kevin, I can't hear you.
Oh, hold on. Can you not hear me? Is it okay?
You're just a little bit low, that's all.
You're a little
Let
low.
me bring it closer. Hold on. Is that any better right now?
Yeah.
Maybe big on the screen. Apologies. But I was saying that basically you can really only inflict cruelty, in a sense, when or to be cruel when you wish to inflict pain on another that you don't see as yourself, that you don't see connection with in some manner. And this can be perceptual, or it could be in activity, but there's really no difference in the heart, in my understanding of that. I grew up, I can give you an example. I grew up with my mother, who was both my love of my early life and also one of the cruelest people that I probably knew in my early life. And that's how I judged her. Okay. And it was in my judgment where I held cruelty as being a misperception of the truth. Because if I really saw her, and I was young, I know it's not something to beat oneself up about, but as a young child, it's easy to misperceive. It's easy to not sense what is true about the God self in another person. And, and to over time make peace with what the occurrences or situations were that I grew up under. Some people would call it abusive, some people, whatever. It's just, it was a very difficult situation, let's say. But it was something that I learned personally how to grow throughout and to be patient with. The trouble was to reconcile the inner disturbances. And I knew that from an early life because, I wasn't going to change my mother. I wasn't going to change the world. I was the youngest of 7. So I took this as a means to challenge myself, even at a very young age, to learn acceptance of what situations would have to be and what they were naturally, that I was born into, that either, I would never have turned it to be angry at God. I was born not having that in me to lash out at a higher power or at the unfairness of life. That was meaningless. For me personally, it was just about judgment towards my mother at the time. And I learned how to manage that. I learned how to get by that. And I learned then how to heal that, I think, much later, which was in my 30s or so. I would have to say it was my 30s more than anything. And as my mother softened, of course, she went through her 70s around that same time and softened quite a bit. And, our relationship only grew to be mutually understanding. But, I think it's important just to recognize, I go back to what Alan said, or what the guide really said, about that, when you have fear and you see that fear does predominantly affect, let's say, a certain domain of your life, then really, yes, there must be underneath it some place where you can access a perceived cruel part of you, where you feel separate, where you feel as though there's a what's the word? A call to inflict some distance and some pain towards something else which feels threatening. And that's what I went through when in my 30s, or maybe even 40s now, if you think about it. In my 40s, when I learned of the pathwork and I did the dialogues, like, for instance, what Marian was talking about, having that, let's say, the 3-voice dialogue, there was times where my cruelty came out very strong. And as a child, I never saw that within me. I was always the nice, the good boy, okay? The good boy that inwardly judged others for being, how could you be so apparently cruel to people? How dare you be that crass or that nasty, but, you suffer the internal dialogue then, instead of it being out in the world. You either, and that's what makes it so clear for me personally when I read this lecture, is that you have inner needs that you were incarnated with that seem to speak to you. But when you see the judgments that I make upon the world, that's just my way of pushing my own fulfillment of my inner needs outside and saying, you need to accommodate me, or this situation needs to accommodate me. No, it really doesn't. That's a cop-out in my idea there. So yeah, ultimately it's not easy, I know, but ultimately, once you recognize what you miss in this lecture, the guide talks about what you miss in either your life situation, but I would go one step further and just say, it's really what you miss in the key to yourself. Why can you not supply that? Why can you not see that you can supply that item that you so wish the world would supply to you? That's where I would say it's about, and then once you know that you're whole, that you can supply that need, you can give freely because you have it. You have it in abundance and then you can give, right? But you can't give what you think you lack, because then there's always a sacrifice, right? Then there's always a blame game, or I did this for you, you know? So yeah, that's just my experience of the lecture. So thank you for giving me the chance to share.
Thank you, Kevin.
Appreciate that.
Joel, do you have any thoughts? We can get back to you if you want later on.
Yeah, I'm just pretty much in a listening mode, Alan. I found this lecture to be quite difficult, but I appreciate I appreciate what everybody's been saying, and it's illuminating. There's certainly a lot to think about. It is challenging to think that unless we release the fear, the cruelty is still going to remain. So I don't have a lot of fear of death, but I have other fears. And so accepting the idea, which I believe is the concept here, that the other fears, unless resolved, are going to fuel cruelty. I don't see the link, but I accept that that's the truth. So I have to see, try to see the connection. And I think maybe one thing that has occurred to me is, cruelty is such a strong word, right? And so perhaps part of it is that if we're mildly cruel, like if I'm withholding, right? Somebody that I love needs something from me, but I'm withholding out of self-protection. And in a way, that's a kind of cruelty. So I'm wondering about that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, different kinds of cruelty or different gradations of cruelty.
Yeah, gradations. So it may not be, like I'm killing somebody or, attacking them or physically or emotionally, but I'm just not being supportive or helpful, because I haven't confronted my own limitations. You see what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, worth thinking about.
Joel, does the word punish help lighten that a little bit, or does that make it just the same as cruelty?
That's interesting. I'll have to think about that, Kevin.
There's several other words that we could come up with, but yeah, indeed, you're right. Cruelty is a very strong word. I think when I was a child, I related it to physical cruelty that seemed to be very like sickening to me. If I saw it on a movie, I would just like shiver with it. And I think it was because it was reflecting the other sorts of cruelty that I was having in my life psychologically. So yeah, it made my skin crawl when I would see someone who, like a caricature of a person in a movie who was blatantly cruel. But yeah, I lived with a person who generally enjoyed punishment and smiled when they inflicted some level of pain and acknowledgement of the cost of that punishment. Like they would find some level of joy in having that punishment inflicted. Okay.
Yes.
Well, when you think about it, go ahead, Marion.
Oh, just quick. Yes, the guide addresses that, negative pleasure.
Yeah, he does. In this lecture
yes.
too, he addresses that.
Right.
In the questions and answers, he talks about the very last paragraph last but one, he says, since you feel the whole world is against you, out to harm and slight you, to reject and humiliate you, you must toughen yourself. Cruelty is almost the only weapon with which to defend yourself against such a world. Therefore, you must hang on to it. And then he says, yeah, I think there's another passage where he basically says that people are comfortable in their cruelty. People, oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, top of page 8. Check this out. When you want to see the truth above all and reach for it, it will come to you. As long as you remain in a hazy climate, you must hold on to the cruelty. The cruelty will be your precarious pleasure.
He said, because certain things that I remember that are pretty much an exact quote, not exactly because I don't have it in front of me, and that is the guide saying, as humanity as a whole, I'm not talking about each individual person, everybody's different on the scale, is more afraid of its pleasure than its pain. And that always stood out in the teachings, to know that as a basic concept, and everybody is somewhere on that scale. The familiar pain is much more sought often than the pleasure of the expanded state. So something that I'm so grateful for, because I now accept gratitude as the foundation of life. And that has a lot of meaning for me, because I'm so grateful for, I've mentioned many times, personality defense types. My dominant higher self quality is heart, with head and creator there also. And so my defense is emotion. And so I've learned, and I'm so grateful for core energetics and all the work I've done energetically, because I learned that emotions do not transform unless expressed. Now, if it's done healthfully, like I have my hitting Bataka in my bedroom, my pillows, I use my master's picture. If I'm not identified with my higher self, I have to talk to God. That's in the lectures. If I am my higher self, I have it all in me. I am it. I am. But when I step out into this mean, nasty Marion, I need to talk to God. So when I put in so I know for my type, complaining is something that is kind of held in the unconscious. I won't complain because I want to look good. So for me to complain, my higher self, my God self, when I go in my bedroom, get out my Bataka, put my pillow there, and I think, you know what? I think I need my complaining session. I'd swear the picture I'm looking at of my spiritual master is my outer exemplification of my higher self, my God self. I swear the smile comes on my higher self master's face, because Marion is now going to complain. And she's going to release some very creative energy in a healthy way. And that's the emotion body. So I always tell, because the guide always said, you do not do this without the hand of God. You do not transform these images without, as a metaphor, the hand of God. So I make a statement of my intention in the moment. My intention is to release what is triggered by someone else, not caused by someone else. Nobody causes my pain, my anger, my cruelty, or any of that. But I may not feel that. So when I state my intention is to now release from my emotion body, my subtle body, what has been held there, that it got triggered by so-and-so or something. And I'm now going to release it so I may be filled with your light, love, and life. And then I let it go because of my core training, which is just wonderful. Then I can vibrate at the end and smile and put everything down and go about my day. But I am the emotion type. Now, the reason type's not going to maybe run to do that. And the will type may not either. The dominant, we all have all three. But so I can't tell somebody to do what I do, but find your own way of releasing the emotion self without acting it out. All these shootings in New York City, none of these people know how to release their emotion body. They have to act it out. It has to come out.
Give me a minute. I'll be right back.
So I say, I'm so grateful for the tools that I've been given to work with this and not stop myself by judging myself, because I came as a human being in this life to unfold in the service of God and to be that have that ego that's separate from God, and more and more and more surrender through pain. It's always through pain. Yeah. I'm not talking about suffering. Suffering is when I'm totally identified with only being a human being. That is total suffering. Pain is the distance I am from merging with God. It's pain. It's nothing bad in pain. It's painful to be any distance from God. It's pain.
What I found, Marion, is when I stopped resisting the evil, right? The good boy, the good, happy, smiley face boy that was holding it inside for decades, right? When finally you don't resist the evil that you have to share from inside you, and you accept it, that it's an expression of the good beneath it, that it's an expression of the same one energy, then you learn very quickly, because you can accept it in yourself, you can learn how to accept it in the world. It's very one-to-one.
Yes, exactly, because it turns into delight.
It does. It turns into delight.
And into appropriateness.
Yep.
And
You
I,
stupid
the
idiot,
guide
right?
teaches this. Yeah, the guide teaches this. And I've always helped other people
Yep.
see this. There are certain childhood patterns, certain ones from childhood that remain your whole lifetime as a gateway for transformation. Not just because they're there. You don't want them to be sitting there and acting them out, but as a gateway. So mine, you were the youngest. I was the youngest of four. Very little attention paid to me. I had to learn by what my sisters and my brother were doing, because we were a very hardworking Midwestern family. And that has carried me through my whole hardworking Marion. And it's hard for me to let go and have fun and pleasure. And so when I go through all my complaints and nastiness, I come into delight.
Yeah, it's a wonderful dance, isn't it? When you actually give yourself that leeway to acknowledge your expressions, whatever that they might be. They don't have to go beyond it and destroy people. They're just expressions, and they're energetic forces that need to come out. But like you said, Marion, it's so important. I don't know how, you must have said it very often, but it's so important. I don't think you can say it often enough, is you wrap that light around you. You do this work knowing that you're safe, because it's very easy to get lost without that light around you first. So when you go into the lower self and you can express, I mean, you do it more often, it becomes like literally you lean up against the tree, like you said. It's like, oh, yep, okay, no problem. Higher self is here. Let me just go, but in the beginning, people can get they can get lost by delving into the lower self without the connection to the higher self. That's so
exactly. We don't do this without, and the guide used the metaphor, hand of God.
Yeah, hand of God, exactly.
And everybody has to find their own way. Everybody has their own unique way. And so it's find your way, because that is total safety. And it just allows that letting go, letting God, and appreciating more of that I'm here as a human being unfolding. I'm not becoming a new person. I'm unfolding to who I already am, have always been, and always will be. It's there in me. And being grounded in those concepts helps to then use, and the tools, especially I find the core work, because me as a highly emotion type, I need to release those emotions. Now I'm doing my morning pages again to write all, I stopped those for a while, but now I do my 3 morning pages. I've started up again because I need a little bit more information coming from the unconscious.
Yeah. It ebbs and it flows, right? But so long as you're attuned to your higher self, you can sense when the restriction or the need for expansion may not be as available. And then you need that creative urge to come out. So you can feel that. You could feel that kind of ebb and flow as you go through your life. Yeah.
Thank you.
But something that occurred to me is just a little bit of a tangent here, but Kevin, when you were talking about punishment, so when I think about the traditional way in which the church often expressed itself and organized religion, no matter what the denomination, there's so much of this of the judgment and condemnation, right? And so that I think in some ways that individuals it unfortunately they took that role on themselves.
Mm.
They became the punishers.
Mm.
So that's how they became God,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And
Mm.
it was out of self-protection and self-preservation.
Mm.
And I see Beverly, I see you, and I see it, in the plantation mentality, right? That the cruelty towards other human beings was a means of self-preservation, um, for the plantation owners, a misguided way of self-preservation, right? Of elevating themselves. And then I think that what happens is individuals, particularly men, become physically dominating, punishing of others using physical force, that that was taken on as a means of self-defense and self-preservation. But then it went too far, you see. And that was the way to protect that inner core, that soft place, that one then became completely disconnected from, because they were violent, right? They were comfortable in being physical and dominating. And so that's part of the transition that we're in, is getting away from that, being compassionate, right?
Yeah.
When we see it with war, we often think, why aren't we waging peace? Why aren't we sending food and medical supplies and building schools and building hospitals and clinics? Why aren't we meeting the real needs of the real people? But we know what the answer to that is. So we're as individuals, we have all of this human history that's gone before us, and that's also part of us that we're trying to shed. That that Marian is talking about, the process of the individual, and how how do we deal with our lower self, that is part of us as human beings, but it's also part of our defenses as that we learned as children, and that we brought in with us.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was in my teens, and I became a born again Christian, much to my parents' unfortunate demise. They didn't like that at all. But at that time, it was how I expressed my own nature, right? And what I felt was lacking in, like, a connection, right? And one of the things that really kind of stuck with me ever since that time was, all things work for the good, or all things are potentially healing. All things, ultimately work for the good for those that love God, right? And are called
That's
according
certainly
to
what the
his
guide
purpose.
says. Yeah, that's certainly.
And this resonates with me, not in the way of born again necessarily, how I related to it at that time, which was sadly an in-group, out-group kind of mentality, right? Of, well, okay, well, unless you're saved and blah, blah, blah. But, honestly, if there's one epitaph, or there's one thing I want on my gravestone, it's that all things work for the good, because that's really what I feel in my heart. Like, if I look back the last 50 years, that's the one thing that I'm here to both learn and teach. Every relationship I have with my siblings, every relationship that I have with any loved one, tends to center around sharing that viewpoint, that really, when bad things do occur, it's really not so bad. Like, I understand that we can get lost in the grief or the pain or the trauma or even the cruelty of a given situation. But yeah, for some reason, and I'm not exactly sure why, but it always resonated with me as soon as I heard those words. And yeah, maybe my understanding of them was as a child, when I was a child, but
Well, that's
yeah,
certainly what
they
the
never
guide.
left me.
And that's why there can be no regrets.
Yeah, right. Yeah, precisely. Yeah. Yeah. Although I would say, Alan, if there is a feeling of regret, that's good. That's a good thing to acknowledge. Just like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
feeling of
But
cruelty, or
everything has to apply to the moment, or to the
there's
right.
no ultimate regret. True. I would 100% say that.
Yeah.
You know, when in our higher self, or when in our, yeah, certainly unitive state, there's no regrets for sure.
So maybe when you regret something, what you're really saying is, I wish I had deepened my awareness or raised my consciousness at that point, so I had done something differently. In other words, I wish I took the opportunity to raise my consciousness so that then I would have not done something that I now regret. But I realized I had the ability to raise my consciousness, or if I didn't have the ability, it was something that I had to experience.
Yeah, most of the near-death experiences that I've read or listened to, predominantly in the life review, surround a feeling of self-review, in a sense, right? That you take on what you perceive others have taken on in hurt based upon your own actions, your actions that were unloving. And you in a sense, you can call it judgment, self-judgment, or self-awareness, self-acknowledgement, just understanding that that's who you were in those moments, but that you learn how to forgive yourself through seeing those things, right? Through really firmly seeing it from the other person's point of view. Because almost entirely, from most of the near-death experiences, most of the time, the loved ones that you encounter tend to go, no, it's really fine. It's okay. It's forgiven. It's done. But it's the self that has a hard time letting go of it, and that's, one of the processes.
Instant karma.
It's interesting. Tracy and I were watching this. I guess there's a Netflix series. Part of it's about near-death experiences, and I've read books about it as well. But it's rather funny. I've never heard anybody talk about, well, the first thing that happened was I was brought before a court
Right.
of higher beings, and the first thing they said is, okay, what are you guilty of? Tell us tell us all your sins, and then we'll go from there. And then we'll tell you what we think you really did besides all that. Right? No, it's this beautiful, light. There's all this light, and there's these angelic beings and higher beings, and you never want to come back. I've never heard anything about any judgment. So
Yeah.
I think that's our own the God image, right? That we're going to punish ourselves.
Exactly. And that is proof right there that we are firmly tethered in our consciousness to the God self, because we have the power to punish ourselves. And that is clearly one of the first things that we will want to do when we feel that guilt. So it's an interesting scenario that the power of the self can be used for whatever purposes the self wishes to use it for, right? In the moment. So one of the movies that speaks to me on that is What Dreams May Come. And I'm sure many of you know it already, with Robin Williams and, with the afterlife. But that movie, granted, it's very dramatic and it can be very torturous in some scenes, but it's, to me, it's based on a very true concept, or a very true spiritual concept,
Yeah, and then there's defending your life. Remember that?
Which one?
Defending your life.
I don't know.
That's kind of when you got to go before the tribunal. Kind of what you just said. Yeah.
Well, and I think the guide says, if God is love, right, then it's not consistent with the nature of love that there would be judgment and condemnation, right?
Well, I mean, the bullshit happens here on Earth. You see, apparently, according to God, the cruelty, the judgment, all the bad stuff happens here, and that's why we can grow, because in the spirit world, those things don't really apply. and you don't have the terror and the fear and the judgment and the pain.
Mm.
We have those here so that we can grow with them or from them.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, of course, the guide also does say that you create a reality. Your consciousness creates a reality to some degree of what you expect after you
Yeah.
die. You experience what you expect you're going to experience for a while until you are led away and told that that's not really the deal.
Yeah, Alan, one of the concepts that really resonated with me is that infinite freedom with infinite possibilities, which is basically what God himself or what the God self has at its disposal at all times, naturally will allow for forgetfulness of self. Because when you play, and a child can play this, just you see a child get lost in its own play and its own fantasy. And yeah, I mean, it's very easy for me to, just like remembering the self is the path to healing, so too forgetting the self can easily be seen as the path to just, well, that's where my play led me, right? So when you can see evil as, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do, it's just an admission that we forgot ourselves. And I forget myself plenty. We all do.
That's
But
what he calls a fascination with creation.
yeah, exactly. It's really wonderful to
Yeah.
play and then forget who you are in the play.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's easy to see the first separations from God in that manner with a light of forgiveness at them. Because yeah, without that, how can one dance in the unitive state alone? It's hard to understand that from, I mean, in the physical sense, I mean, in the separate sense, in the part you have a partner sense. That's not you. There's a joy and a pleasure in that here that we experience, that it's laced with potential pain, right? If you feel the separation more than the unity. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a saying that I like: you have to know who you are not in order to know who you are. You have to know what you don't want in order to know what you want. And that's the world of duality. And it's the gateway to the world of unity. So it's having to know both. And so, because the beginning lectures, there's only the golden ocean. So this is all an illusion. And that's, the more we're in this truth, and that frightens us sometimes to find out this is all an illusion. It's a necessary one. It's a necessary illusion, but that's what it is. And so we keep approaching that, our core, which is one with everything. And even scientists are now, they've proven the Big Bang happened. They've proven there was a Big Bang and we only had gas, and then it became planets, and then all this evolution of form. Now they're questioning, this is leading edge scientists, not the general ones, what was before the Big Bang? So
Fascinating.
fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I want to share a little bit, actually. First of all, I thank Alan and Tracy for choosing this lecture, because the Life Center and cruelty, I mean, these are very, very important topics, especially the cruelty. I think in myself, I know, and as I observe around, and in most of us, we really not aware of this thing. I mean, we really don't want to face this cruelty in us. It seems to be like a big thing. And as I observe myself and look back, I see a clear correlation here between the sensitivity of the Life Center and the cruelty. And it's there, very, very clear, the way I see it in myself anyway. How? Because if we, as I observe, like different people, I see that, the most sensitive people are the ones that usually becomes the cruelest one. I mean, I see, like, at work and around, and the people that I know and have met, when people are sensitive, then this cruelty becomes like defense mechanism, as you were saying earlier, Alan. Is really defense mechanism, because you feel that's a weapon that you're going to use to use Kevin's word, to punish those that you feel are inflicting upon you whatever it is that they are inflicting, and rejecting you, ignoring you, or torturing you in some psychological, physical way, And but to me, it is clear that correlation here. And in myself, I know that I used to be a very sensitive child. I was, and a young adult also. And I remember, whenever and then this is like, as you also were saying, Alan, there is a suspicion of other people. It's like you kind of expect that they reject you or behave in certain way towards you, and you create that, and that's exactly what happens. But this is the thing that you have inside of you. And that's the exact same thing that I was finding outside, the rejection, the non-acceptance. And then that created such a cruelty in me. I mean, I don't have so much cruelty now in me, as I was saying earlier. I mean, I don't see it anyway. I think I have been working on myself for a long time, and I have been able to become a lot of that. But I mean, I know now I don't see so much in me, because I think I can honestly say that I wish harm to no one. In fact, one of my favorite saying is that, one of the, to quote or paraphrase Socrates, is that suffering wrong and inflicting wrong are two great evils, but one is much better off suffering wrong than inflicting wrong. So I try to live by that. It's like, if it's something bad was to happen, or me to inflict something wrong on someone else, I kind of rather go through that myself and suffer that myself, because I know the consequences of inflicting wrong on someone else are greater than the one of suffering wrong. I think you, in fact, you heal yourself whenever not that you deliberately are going to put yourself in that situation, but if you need to choose between inflicting wrong or suffering wrong, you are better off suffering wrong than inflicting the wrong. So, but I do clearly see, though, this cruelty in so many other people. Not so much in myself now. I mean, that might be a bad thing, actually, but I see how, like, people, and cruelty does come in, or shows in different ways. Like, I see, for example, that how some people love to share, like, bad news. Like something bad happened to someone. Oh, what happened to such and such? And, it's like they take joy of sharing this bad news. Or even with these medias now, like, people love to share these cruel things that happen to other people.
You mean like
I'm like, really?
Right.
Yeah. Like, what is there? Like, these videos of people like killing themselves or torturing or fighting and doing to themselves the cruelest thing. I'm like, really? What's going on? And even in this country, if you think of boxing, for example, I think like, my God, in this country, rooster fighting is prohibited. But then boxing, these two people, like, beating each other and killing each other and, beating each other to death sometimes, that's legal? And even it's even worse in Spain, for example. They take joy. I mean, you have the bull thing going on, and and then the stadium, when either the bull has to die or the person has to die, and then people like celebrating. It's like there is no fun until they see blood, either from the bull or from the person. I'm like, isn't that a clear thing? It's like how active cruelty is actually in most of us humans, So and I see that in like many people. It's like how they, like, for example, we have a group, and my brother, I think yesterday, he sent this video of these two ladies like fighting themselves to death, and at the end they actually fell down from the roof of the house, onto the floor, and probably both of them died. But I'm like, I didn't tell him anything because he's my younger brother, and maybe separately I will eventually tell him something. But I was saying to myself, my God, this brings tears to my eyes, to see these ladies beating themselves to death like this. What joy is in there? For me, there is none. There is none. But for him, there seems to be, and for most people, apparently, because this video is going around like this, So I think this cruelty issues is a very, very big issue for us humans. And I think the more we connect with that cruelty and are able to really, as the lecture says, incorporate that healthy ego with that life center, and really being able to deal realistically with the problems of life, of everyday life, as an adult, as a grown-up individual, then the happier we are going to be. But the first step, as the lecture says, is really to acknowledge that cruelty, that it is in us. As much as I feel that I have overcome it, it's there somewhere, because there is fear in me still. So there's work to do. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you all. listening.
Thank you, Juan.
Thank you,
Of
Juan.
course.
Thank you, Juan.
And
Thank
even
you.
the fact of those of us who are not cruel, the fact that we're in a world with so much cruelty also means something.
Mm.
We're still interacting with it. We're still dependent or in some have a relationship with it because we're here. It's part of our.
Absolutely. Yeah, most of us, I mean, maybe not a lot of us have, thank God, I think we evolving spiritually. And even though all this cruelty and all these bad things seem to be going on outside, I think we're moving forward to a better place. But, and there is a lot of us, like this group here and many other groups around the world, that we are light workers. We are, cultivating this beautiful radiance that is also showing in the world. And we need to continue to do that, because I think this is the best thing we can do for all these wars. It's not really going out and protesting and fighting and this, that, and the other. It's really working in ourselves and working to really incorporate those two. You know what I mean? Notice that cruelty, look to where it's coming from, and find a way to connect a life center, with a healthy ego, with a healthy ego, so that we can, eventually reach that life center itself by, putting on, overcoming all these layers and really connect to the life center, become whole by surrendering to it, and eventually become its instrument in this world. So really the best thing we can do for ourselves is work on ourselves and their self-knowledge and knowing ourselves, cultivating those and eliminating those quality that cause us discomfort and pain and all that. And I think we are doing that work slowly but surely, and thank God for that,
I think the guide somewhere says that if only 10% of the people in the world were participating in a path of self-facing, then there would be no war.
Exactly. Isn't that a beautiful thing?
Right.
So there is a solution to it, and I think we are on it. So
Yes, thank you, Juan. I just want to comment because that is so um, powerful what you said, because I think of that phrase, know thyself, it's
yes,
use
exactly.
that all together, because what was
Yeah.
I still say, and I'm so grateful for the liberating of knowing a lot of my personality type of being more emotion, and my defense being more submissive, but learning what's the unconscious part of the submissiveness is a real dynamic. I'm doing it to get my way. I'm doing it to get love. I'm doing it to manipulate you, and to know what's in the unconscious and bring it to consciousness. And so with that, what I learned, so if I'm out on the street and I'm having my, my judgments jumping around, but I'm always reporting it into my higher self, and that dilutes it. It's not going out. It's not going out to the people on the sidewalk. It is bringing me close to God where I'm reporting in. And so they're face to face. And when we have these opposites, pain and pleasure, when they turn into pain and pleasure, from pain or pleasure, they start coming together like this in front. When they're both side by side, that's the pathway to the unitive state. So when I can keep reporting in, it brings me to God, this nastiness, but I'm not sending it out to people. I still see the beauty in the people. But something that has always helped me is that this, the reporting in, and also for my own personality type, I noticed that what got buried unconsciously is I'm giving my power to the other person I'm judging and hating. I'm giving my power to them, the power to define me, the power to take on how I think they see me. That's all part of my dynamic. And so when I can report that in, I don't have to do the long version anymore. I can just tell God, I'm doing it again. Yeah, I'm giving my power to that person on the street. I'm giving my power to that dog, whatever it is. And then it starts the process, so that know thyself is so important.
Absolutely. That's what used to be one of the Socrates' favorite phrase, as we know. It's like, man, know thyself, because really everything is in that. Because the more you get to know yourself, you get to know God. In that connection, it's in this, not only the things that are prohibiting you from becoming the whole that you are, but also that you come to realize the whole that you actually are, and it's incredible. So know thyself, man, know thyself.
When I'm feeling some cruelty towards someone, it's because what preceded that, I gave them some power to define me. It's very subtle and unconscious. And that's when that jumps in, that cruelty. So I need to unwind it to get to, how I think they're looking at me. And start just being who I am, Yeah.
Great. Well, shall we have our meditation? Does anyone have a candle? I'm going to look for a candle. I might have one here somewhere. I don't see one. Does anyone have a candle?
I can get one right quick. Do I just
Yeah.
hold it in front of the screen or what
Just
do I
hold it in
do?
front of the screen. Yeah.
Okay, hold on.
So I like that cat in the background. It's a very nice cat.
They all stop by and look at the screen. Then they get their hug.
I think they're doing their path work there, Jordan.
I don't know, like this or
Yeah, just that's perfect, Marion. Perfect. Just put it down and you can angle the computer down. So that's perfect. That's perfect. Just like that. All right. Let me turn some lights on. All right. I'll read a passage from the lecture. We'll meditate for 15 minutes.
Is there a place for you to be able to put that down, Marion?
uh
Because I don't want you to have to hold it the whole time.
Yeah, you should put it down
That
somewhere.
would be very, yeah,
can you see it? I don't know.
worrisome. Yeah, that's perfect.
Can you see it?
Yeah, is it in a
Yes.
safe place
Yeah,
for
it's
you?
just fine.
And
Okay.
remember, it may get hot.
Yeah,
I'll watch it. Okay.
yeah.
All right. I can't read with the lights out. Okay. When this integration takes place, the vulnerable live center is no longer vulnerable in a negative, dangerous, or debilitating way, but in a positive, wonderful way. It is flexible, alive, vibrant, and full of the strong feelings without which pleasure, joy, and happiness cannot exist. The tremendous strength and intelligence contained in this vulnerable spot will govern all your actions and attitudes. It will cause thoughts and emotions which must bear fruit all around you. It will induce you to be totally constructive in all you do. You will want to give your best and total attention to everything you experience, to all your undertakings. Nothing will be done half-heartedly, with half attention or divided motives. Therefore, the outcome will be more and more desirable and fulfilling. There is no strain in this attention. You will be carried by a sweeping, marvelous strength. Instead of covering up the vulnerable spot, you will bring it out. Instead of shying away from the feelings in this vulnerable spot, you will widen the area of aliveness. You will strengthen it with a new resiliency, which comes from understanding reality and correctly interpreting what goes on in you and in others. All right, 15 minutes.